What is your agenda that you think people are underestimating the importance of?
I mean, obviously the favorite agent is the one I'm working on, but
do the obvious modification of the question.
I would modify the question. What are some agendas I'm like keen on and like but the people are working on and I'm not working on them. I see like AI and democracy and like how to like prevent like states from becoming totalitarian, what like Philip talked about, I think is like very important. I think like we should invest in CLA more. I think I'm kind of keen on people working on agendas which have some chance like helping, even if the paradigm of like how we train the models like changes rapidly. Currently, if you think about like how much effort is spent on different agendas or like different risks in AI safety, a lot of the effort is like concentrated to something like how do we understand like transformers, like what do we do about like transformer-based like LLMs or like multimodal models and so on. And the theory of how things go is like there is some like straight line on a graph, and the basic paradigm doesn't change, it just scales, and you get like automated AI agents and automated AI capabilities development and so on. But I think there is some, and then I don't know, like then you get like scheming AI or something. So I think it's something like the default model of many agendas, and I think there is some probability mass on trajectories which are like there's some like abrupt change. Either us or AIs or some cyborg system like discovers a new architecture, or like something happens like within one training plan, or like there is some like fairly like fast like change, which makes a lot of the things which are very tightly coupled with like how transformers work like not very usable. So I think like on the margin, like I would be excited about more people working on like things which can help if you don't assume a lot of things about like current AI. And the other end of the spectrum is gradual disempowerment, which is like kind of like we probably solved like a lot of the technical alignment problems, like AIs are not scheming. We just have the problem that like civilization is, so that's what I'm working on. So but I think like things on the like kind of like longer time end of like more complex systems, like type of end of the spectrum, like how collective agencies work, how corporations composed of AIs work, how like machine culture works. I think that's also like under investigated. Well, evals for dangerous capabilities or something which is like straight in the middle of the AI safety Overton window, and you can get funding from on it for everyone. It's like I think like we are like investing less resources than we should, but on the margin I'm like less excited about it and more excited about the more like extreme versions on either end of the continuing spectrum.
My favorite kind of work is like negative results, attacking other people's stuff. So DeepMind stopped focusing on sparse autoencoders a few months ago because they were just convinced by the results showing that they can fit noise and that a lot of things just do not actually capture the structure we want. This is just like incredibly valuable. Making a major lab not waste more another year on something which isn't promising is just like insanely valuable and not that expensive to do. There's like something I call like noticing model anomalies. So solid gold magic carp or meter Todd are the like famous examples. The other ones are what Owain Evans's lab is doing. She's just like noticing like totally new or underappreciated features of how weird training is or how weird the eventual system is. Emergent misalignment most recently, subliminal learning and stuff. This is just not expensive to do, and you can feed incredibly good, entirely new directions to people if you're just like paying attention, which is great. I have an idea for a negative result, which I need help with, so grab me after
broadly think that there's historically been too much focus on like narrowly trying to solve intent alignment and not thinking about like the more broader ideas of like how will these systems be used, how will they interact, like governance, property layout, and gradual disempowerment. Within the more narrow stuff, I kind of like the control agenda, but I'm also somewhat concerned about it avoiding kind of warning shots. So I like it with the caveat that think about how to make sure that backfire doesn't happen. And I also kind of agree with the recent like chain of thought monitorability being like a fragile and important opportunity perspective. And so I think kind of like probably for historical reasons there's too much emphasis on stuff that like kind of just like works theoretically like with guarantees and maybe kind of like clever schemes for like ensuring the chain of thought can stay competitive and like making it actually like more representative rather than just like devolving to neuroies. Kind of like that direction too.
Yeah, so one thing I don't like is too much hype because I feel that there are many dimensions, but on the one hand I feel that especially for profits they have incentives to do alignment work that looks good more than it's actually good, and that generates a lot of and people get super excited about things like this, the case of the sparse autoencoders. It's like everybody was doing that, now nobody's doing it. Like what the heck? One thing that I struggle personally is like what type of time horizon makes sense, because some people would say you have an agenda that will work in 5 years, that's too late because it will be dead or something. And some days I wake up and I feel they're right, and some days I wake up and I feel they're wrong. Because maybe we need time to do something more, funded. Besides those concerns that I don't know the answers, I feel that it's good to have people doing empirical things, very practical, some other people do crazy theory, and eventually try to bridge that gap to the best we can. I'm the type of personality that I tend to think that we need everything, and the diversification, and people have different skills, so ideally people find where they can contribute the better and where they fit more naturally. So between theory and practice, and the other axis that I find useful to think of is alignment as control. So aligned AI systems are systems that do what we want, nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. And which is so good, but on the other side, how can you control something super intelligent, right? So in the other extreme of the spectrum, I see alignment as self-regulation. So the AI system will self-regulate and will be nice because it's built like that, which feels more scalable, but it feels that it could go wrong. It could go wrong in so many ways. So I feel that the second view is a bit more difficult to get it right. So we might need some more time. The first one is not easy, but easier than the other one. But I don't think it will work for super long. So in my mind, at least, we have to pursue all of this spectrum, and ideally they will have different regimes of time where they will apply.
All right, thank you. Now, to wake everybody up, let's try to do a shorter one, just to share your top view. What other fields of science do you think we could learn from in AI safety? What are the insights that we are not appreciating enough? And note that maybe a valid opinion could be, nope, we are good. Just most of it is already there. And maybe that's a big too.
I can say one thing. I think neuroscience has a lot to teach interpretability. I don't think neuroscience have no answer, but they have so many past failures that there's a lot to learn from that. And so people in neuroscience have a lot of discipline on how to break down things. Like whenever you have a result, people in neuroscience are super skeptical. It's like, but have you tried this control, this control, this control? And usually when you control the thing enough, you break it down. So that discipline, I think, is super useful. So it's more about methodological thing that can be learned more than they have the answer and we just need to copy paste.
The only one that comes to mind for me is like history and like political science governance stuff, trying to I think sometimes we mostly have technical people with technical backgrounds and we're ignorant of history, and we kind of assume things work a certain way, and maybe if we had studied history more, we would understand that things are different. So for instance, there was a less wrong post talking about history of people thinking they're in a race, and using the nuclear race, and just trying to look at the history of did people think they were racing when in fact the Nazis had already given up, and so yeah, that's the one that comes to mind.
It's not an original point, but ML evals are just shockingly bad. There's often just point estimates about error bars. Maybe you have to pull some stuff, so you do something. Item response theory is just this extremely well worked out thing in social sciences. This is how to design a set of questions such that they actually measure the same construct and stuff like that. That was not applied in most machine learning until a few months ago. Still not applied in most of it, but Meter started using. Stats is boring for most people, and it requires you to spend some more compute, so people don't do it. But I'd be much happier with the evals state if we actually used it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those. I think there's still stuff to learn from biology about kind of how systems work. Biologists spend way more compute than us on finding configuration of matters which do stuff, think, and there's so much optimization pressure, so much optimization spent on natural evolution. It's still orders and orders more than what we are doing when training the systems. So I think there's still things to learn, and also I think currently machine learning is more, in some ways it's more it's closer to biology than mechanical engineering or something. So I think there's still more stuff to learn.
When it comes to agendas, what are the essential properties of a decent agenda? I guess Luis touched on this a little bit, but yeah, what it is, and maybe just repeat the important bits.
Yeah, this is a hot take, but I think it's basically, to a large extent, this is not really possible to break down into legible things. I think it's I think it's mostly a matter of research taste. I don't think it's easy to specify 5 criteria. I think it's easy to specify some criteria of bad agendas. The criteria for bad agendas, some of the ideas for what makes agenda bad was like Luis said, one clear thing is if the agenda is kind of makes sense conditional on current level of capabilities. If the agenda makes a lot of sense, kind of assuming that technology stays on 2025 level and agents don't improve or something, or AIs don't improve, that makes it not very relevant. I think another thing which makes me kind of unexcited about agendas if they don't seem to be engaging with the harder parts of the problem. There's a lot of things which maybe somehow helps on the margin a bit and now, but it's not really solving something important. Even if it succeeds, it's yeah, okay, we got something, but it's probably not that great. Another thing which makes me skeptical, I think it's not necessarily a feature of the things which are usually labeled AI alignment like studying something for like 50 years, and then the discipline decides this is like relevant for AI. Like the example of something which I sort of hate is like people thinking about like toy model like trolley problems for like decades and claiming yes, it's like kind of destroys it's like deep insights into ethics of AI or something. So it seems like someone just took what they are already working on and just like what kind of like put the label like, and now with AI on it, similarly to what's happening out in the industry, where like everything is like labeled AI, like linear regression is also AI. Yeah, so these are I think like marks of like bad agendas. I think more subjective thing, and like I feel like more optimistic about when like thinking about like what specific people I work on. I feel more optimistic about things where like the people like seem to be like curious about the thing, or like they seem to be like kind of intrinsically care about the thing, as opposed to like people like doing work based on like, yeah, this is like something which like someone should do. It's like easy to get funding for. Like let's do, you know, won't name, but like, you know, like I'm not sure if the funders have the best taste in the ecosystem. Another thing which I like really, which I really hate.
Please.
Sorry, there is like another thing which I really hate, and this is like, so there is this like broader sphere of like AI risk advocacy, which is about kind of explaining to public that like further AI development is like risky. And this field of like AI risk advocacy like benefits from like scary demonstrations, or like some sort of like scare results which show that like AI is scary. And I think there is some like boundary between like research, where you are trying to figure out like how things are, and about something else which is more like propaganda, where like you are trying to like show people that like things are scary, and you kind of like sacrificed like the aim of understanding how things like really are. And I think like the mixture of these like leads to papers which personally I don't like, where you have it's useful as a media weapon, but it's not useful as a research, and it's kind of misleading. So also not exactly devoted. Sorry for one spiel.
Jan said all of mine. Yeah, so the thing about actually you caring about it, that's not a property of the agenda, that's a property of the agenda worker fit or something. You have to care.
Yeah, I don't know how much this contradicts that. I think that not completely. I think the thing Lewis talked about that I would echo is like trying to actually think through your theory of change, and not just like work on something that feels adjacent or feels relevant at a gut level, but or like kind of at a very loose level without having thought through the details. And then you're really just working on something because you like it, and like it uses the tools that you like and stuff like that.
Yeah, as a short comment, the type of agendas that I like the most are when are a bit modular. So it's like it's not a world domination solution of the whole thing, but it's more like this is this thing that solves this thing and is related with the rest of the things in this way, so that then you can take that the state with some other thing and you can combine them into something else. Yeah, I find that more attractive.
Alright, thank you. Now I have two related questions, but to make it more amenable to short answers, I'll just ask them separately. So first, what research do you want to see AI labs pursue versus independent researchers or academia?
Yes, there's just a bunch of stuff that labs can do, like third-party evaluations. For instance, things you can actually trust in a different way. There's presumably other things labs can do, but I'll think about it while someone else is speaking.
like the idea of labs making more explicit safety cases and exposing them to public scrutiny and like trying to like make them better with input from like scientists and stuff.
I think exactly one problem which the labs are often not in a great position to work on are like some facets of like proposing solution to like social technical problems, because it will be a bit weird if I don't know like 1 week like nobody has an op-ed about like end this technology will disrupt society and like disrupt democracy, and the next week you have like an op-ed and like we also have a solution how to restructure society invented in our company and trust us, it's for your benefit. So I think the labs are not in a great place to like propose like some government solutions. They can like agree with them, but when they propose some things, they are always like kind of people like that is like suspicion like what are all the motivations going into it. In terms of technical research, I think the main thing is the labs are like relatively small. There is like only like fairly limited number of things they can work on. So it's just basic argument. There's like so much things like which people in the labs are like it would be great to work on it. They have some advantage in making experiments which are like really expensive and like use a lot of compute, but there are many useful experiments which you can make which like, don't use a lot of compute. So.
From my side, I would like to see more RL alignment work and less LLM alignment work. Comparatively speaking, it's not that I don't think it should be. And the other thing, from like the more foundational alignment work, what I see is that people usually embrace one view very strongly and forget about everything else. Like I don't know, like, I think singular learning theory will solve everything, and you just work on that. And I'm personally interested in how different theories can interface. So, for example, I'm very interested to combine explicitly with computational mechanics, for example. That usually people either work in one or the other, but combining these theories, I'm very excited about.
Alright, where do the various AI safety startups, like Goodfire, Transluce, fit into this? You know, just startups in general. What are your thoughts on this?
Is Transluce a startup?
I don't know.
Yeah, it is.
Is yeah, if you've got an extremely scalable alignment idea, I guess you'll need lots of money. So seems that is in fact what Transluce is doing, as I understand it.
Part of how I think about it is like some of them seem to be about overcoming the bottlenecks in organizational structure of the labs, like instead of, I don't know, like the labs are already, as organizations, they are already growing extremely fast. Growing like way faster is probably not feasible for like organization, like for structural reasons and so on. So probably it often makes sense if like part of the effort like has the type of this is a separate company which is like maybe like 3 or 4 main customers, could have been a department and like could have been a team in the lab, but it's a separate organization. I think that's like part of useful work. There's a lot of things which are more like how to, I think there's a lot of space for startups which do like something like the labs like obviously focus on general intelligence, and there are things like interfacing with like separate like with different like domains, like industries, so there is some space in between which is not sufficient, it's not general enough, so the labs like won't focus on it. And then there's like obviously space for doing things like on the side of customers, like what the customers want. For example, monitoring what the labs are providing or stuff like that.
How do we bridge the gap between what the AI safety arcs are proposing and what the labs are willing to do?
Regulation.
Yeah, so I spoke to somebody in a lab, and they're claiming something like the
far as I'm concerned, this one is related to the regulation a bit. Given that your timelines are short, why are you not that excited about mobilizing the public compared to technical research? I would expect the opposite.
I don't know what my timelines are.
Well, ignore that part if you wish.
Sorry, I don't know. Mobilizing the public for what?
I imagine this might have come as partially as a reaction to your comments about some of the papers that are used as a PR weapon or like a media weapon. I imagine it might have been the context. Whoever has asked the
I
question.
don't know, like, so I think like, okay, so there's some like very general theory of change, which is something like make a lot of people scared and like step 2 and like good things will happen. Or like step 3 is like we stop developing AI or something. I would be more, I would have like easier time like engaging with the question if I knew what the theory of step 2 is. If it is like kind of like why you are like not too excited, why you are more excited about like solving the problem as opposed to like making people scared while timelines are short. So like one very general argument is like, okay, so like what does making people scared or like slowing down AI development like buy you? So like it's time, maybe. So like what you are going to use the time for? Like suppose a bit technical research or like what else? Like will you like I don't know, like maybe you will use the time to like create like global like totalitarian system which will like prevent like AI being developed forever. That's not something which I think is like easy to do, also probably bad. So like you are creating like I think this theory of like slowing down pause AI and so on, most of the theory of impact is like it buys us time to do something. So like ask the question like why you want to do that something. Like if everyone like focuses on like making like everyone scared and like no one works on like actually solving the problem, I think the whole approach is like kind of like somewhat pointless unless you like take some sort of like extremely Eliezer style take that like no one is working on anything useless or best chance like kind of like all research is like useless and we need to focus on advocacy and so on, but I think that's not. I don't agree with like with assumptions of that.
Maybe just a short.
Yeah, so I think adding on to that, like in terms of if the goal is to have some kind of pause, I think that like figuring out when to time the pause is like very hard, and like people disagree a lot on like for instance whether like a 1-year pause right now would be good, because if you did that, like in the meantime, like labs would still be like improving their algorithms, like more chips would be coming out, and so like we would have like less than 1 year delay, right? We would stop training for like large models for a year or something, and then like after that year, like maybe we catch back up to where we would have been like 6 months later. And like it's super unclear to me whether like 1 year now is better than 6 months with like more useful AIs or something, or like more relevant AIs to study. And so I think that's one reason why like I don't know, maybe there's an argument that like if the public kind of wakes up at the moment there's a warning shot that's like generated by something that's correlated with like us getting really close to like transformative AI, that's like better than like just trying to scare the public at a random time.
I just wanted to make a general note that we have a particular selection of panel members, and maybe not all opinions might be reflected here. So just use your judgment for a minute, please. All right. We are getting to the more specific in the weeds questions. I'll go with some of those, but in the meantime, there might be more space, or if you want the more general ones, upvote them. Alright, this one is specifically about the AI control agenda that was mentioned. Do you think it's overall like positive or negative? Possibly elaborate a little bit, but we can also get to other questions, so don't spend too much.
I'm in favor of myself thinking about this more and reducing my uncertainty, so that, because I think there's like, some chance that it is like very positive, or like more robustly positive than like an average thing. But like also, there could be backfire. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of like a few hot takes. I think like it has some bits of the hype, like hype properties that or like alignment solving alignment is like hard, like understanding what's going on in the systems is hard. Let's do control. It's easier in some sense, it sounds easier. Personally, I have a lot of uncertainty about it. I think it's like fairly plausible that like it increases risk. I wrote the argument down, like part of it is I think it makes the things or like incidents which could have been warning shots, it makes them like more likely contained like within the labs. So the like my theory how it can be harmful is like you don't have like that much visibility like inside of the labs. But like if something bad happens, if I don't know, like XAR like releases like Mecha Hitler or something, it's like kind of like we see that if they had implemented like a control agenda properly, which would be very uncharacteristic of them. Like you just like not see that, but like you can imagine this type of stuff like happening like inside, and like also there are like different like sub agendas or like sub schemes of the agenda. What I feel like particularly like negative about is the idea that like we will extract a lot of useful alignment work from like AIs which are misaligned, but will sort of like fear being kind of uncovered. I think how this works in practice, my model how this works in practice is the unaligned AIs like kind of like talk a lot with the researchers inside of the company, and it seems like very difficult to like kind of I think the agenda is good at catching the unaligned AIs, like kind of like writing like obvious like exploits in code, but what if the misaligned AIs like which are like already like very smart and like are working on like deep alignment problems, what if they just like kind of convince you about like bad philosophical positions or something, like how do you catch that? I think like the idea that like you have like 10,000 geniuses in a data center and they are like misaligned, and you are keeping them under some sort of totalitarian Orwellian surveillance, and they don't figure out how to like somehow like mislead you is my model of that you're something like if you're doing that like you're building some sort of like pressure cooker which kind of like explodes after you reach some level of intelligence. There is a question of what the level is. And but this is not the whole agenda, so like there are like many different, there are things which are like we see like kind of obviously common sense sensible, and then there are the more extreme ends like how do we extract useful work from misaligned AIs, and I feel like very pessimistic about it.
I'll say one thing in favor of it, which is I feel like it's at least engaging with the assumption that the AIs that we are using might be misaligned, as opposed to some of the other agendas, which are sort of maybe assuming this problem away. But my personal hot take. Alright. Okay. Speaking of hot takes, what is your hot take of the month? Maybe you can start with Faza, who just joined us. Yeah, ideally agenda related, but you know.
Actually, I have a hot take agenda related. And here's the hot take. It's not necessarily about control agenda, but in
you've spent some time in the academic realm, you know things are broken, you know, by and large. Reviews are broken, incentives are broken. Yeah, I think that's clear. So here's the hot take. We need a way to somehow fix things. This also applies to the control agenda. An issue that exists in a lot of these sort of communities where people propose a new agenda, you know, influential labs release a new research paper or a paper in general, it attracts a lot of attention and a lot of funding from different communities. Who knows how many people are thinking about this control agenda? I haven't personally read it, it might be great. But the proposal here is that we need a party, a mechanism where people review these agendas, these papers, publicly with your name and credibility attached to it, such that here is Jan Koolwhite's review of the control agenda, and a few independent other individuals could also review similar agendas, such that if it turns out that you're good at reviewing agendas and proposing frameworks and solutions going forward, people in the future could consult you about their agenda. So you could even think about how there might be a market for some sort of thing like this. But I think, yeah, it's a little bit scary to me that some people can decide to come up with an agenda and somehow lots of funding gets repurposed toward that agenda. I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, I'm just saying it'd be good to have an oversight mechanism for people to review these things before so many people, you know, invest time and resources. Hopefully that was close enough.
Actually, let me try a thing. There was another question that was related to what you just talked about. Let me jump to that question and then we will give hot takes to other people. And this one was, well, to the extent that you think we need more coordination in AI alignment, how could we get more of it?
I don't know. I think coordination is really difficult in general. I haven't been in the opinion that too many people are working on alignment such that there is a massive surplus in one domain over another domain. Maybe interpretability is getting way too much attention. Maybe that's right. But yeah, there's way too many people in the world. More people should be working on this. So I don't really know. Yeah, I don't really know how we can have that coordination.
Right? Other people say comments? Hot microphone.
Yeah, so one thing I'm very interested is in this question asked before, which are these other disciplines that could contribute. Me and some friends, we believe that there is a lot of expertise out there that is super relevant and people are not aware of that. Yes. So yeah, I'm also part of PIBS and that's part of the mission of PIBS. So trying to identify relevant skills in academia or in other places, but in my view, the way for that to work, somebody has to build this bigger vision and then you can approach these people and say, this is the way your expertise will help critically into that. But they will not figure out themselves. And so you need some sort of big vision where you can explain them in a convincing way how that expertise would make a difference. And that's work that is sort of meta-alignment work. It's not like pushing any agenda particularly, but more like thinking what type of pieces do we need and how would they relate. And to the extent you can figure that out, you can be able to pitch this in more convincing way so that you can effectively turn these experts from working in this niche in their corner to other work. I'm very excited doing that type of work, and I don't see so much of that being done. So yeah, that's one thing that I
Let's do one more hot take, if any of you has a hot take of the month.
I have a little hot take. I sort of cannot help thinking that the alignment problem, we also have a human alignment problem. Like we are not aligned to each other, and I really hope that if we can advance the AI alignment problem, we can, if we do it in the right way, we can get principles that can also help to align ourselves. I think that would be nice.
Yeah, who has seen Mito's HCast, the task horizon estimates, very famous graph from a few months ago? Yes, my hot take is no, agents can't do hour-long tasks which take a human an hour at 50% accuracy. Probably not in software and definitely not in other things. I also don't believe it's doubling every 7 months.
I don't know how hot of a take it is, but yeah, I basically think that current LLMs always know when they're being evaluated, and so maybe those evals aren't completely uninformative, but like whatever you take away should be conditioning on them, like knowing they're evaluated, role playing in the way that they're being evaluated and stuff like that.
Alright, if there are no more hot takes, then where is some confusion in your agenda, and what shape does it take? Possibly what are the cruxes for your agenda being useful or not, that they are not sure about yet?
I think maybe we should try to like at least like model like some of the stances which are like not here. I'm just like noticing, yeah, and also part of tips. I think like here you are getting a lot of kind of like view like adjacent to like more the like I think like we are like a group of people like who feel like more like bullish on insights from other disciplines are useful. Yeah, like kind of like thinking is useful. It's not just about like doing like more like machine learning engineering or something. I think like so here I don't know, like I kind of like want to present some sort of like slightly general take against a lot of things which we are saying. So I think like some reasonable like kind of counter arguments to things which I think most of us agree is. So like, okay, like maybe it's possible on like LLMs, like basically on current architectures, a few minor tweaks, like kind of like bootstrap the recursive self-improvement loop, where like you have the AI 27 style, like kind of coder next year, and like researcher like half year after that, and like super intelligence in 2 months, and so on. And it's kind of, it doesn't require like almost any architectural changes, you just pick like never release, like you do more RL, but like no big changes, and also the recursive self-improvement dynamic is like so extremely fast that kind of society has no role, like money has no role, it's just like who like launches, which like launches the dynamic the fastest, like wins. And yeah, I think like if on this trajectory like many of the like kind of more complex or like more nuanced or like more like let's understand agents, let's understand theory, let's learn from other disciplines. I think a lot of these things are like kind of like way less relevant, and what's probably relevant on this scenario is either like stopping the labs from like learning the recursive self-improvement dynamic, or like I don't know, like solve some version of how to control LLMs probably, or like how to keep like LLMs like somewhat like interpretable. So like on this trajectory, like you really want to prevent never release, you really want to have like somewhat like reliable chain of thought, it's probably your best hope, and you want to know what the labs are doing internally, so you want a lot of transparency in the labs, or you just may want to like kind of have a lot of public backlash and just like stop the process by mass uprising or something. So yeah, if you believe like this is like super hyperbole, yeah, there are like probably other things are sensible. So that's like one possible counter-argument.
For what it's worth, that's not strong. I'm like 40% on that.
I think like I'm like representing the view like fairly reasonably, and I also like I put some like probability mass on it. I'm just not putting like 80% probability mass on it. Another view which we are I think not really representing is we are not really representing kind of like full like Eliezer view, which could lead to corners like we are like extremely far from like solving the alignment problem, like no one works on the real parts of the problem, and our best chances are kind of Hail Mary plans, like have humans like improve like human intelligence by like genetically modifying embryos so they are smarter, and like this new crop of genetically enhanced alignment researchers will be sufficiently smart to solve the problem, in the unlikely chance that we will like stop AI or so I think like there's like some strain of reasoning which is kind of like extremely like pessimistic, extremely bearish about like kind of about like everything what we work on and also almost everything the labs work on, and kind of like everything is like very like kind of not heading to the right direction. So if you believe that, like you probably want to focus on the political action. My guess, if you want to focus on the political action, like you probably, then there is a question, if you hope there will be some warning shots. I think if you hope there will be some warning shots, you should probably focus on like what is the plan if the warning shot happens and suddenly there is a policy overturn window to actually stop the thing. If you believe there is no warning shots, there is no fire alarm, and like we just like die in 1 hour or something, you should probably try to convince the world that like if AI progress continues, like just like everyone dies, and try to convince people like preemptively, and you are probably feeling fairly pessimistic, and if you are like this type of person, you should probably try to convince more people to pre-order like Eliezer's book or stuff like that. And again, like I'm not claiming this is like nonsense. I think it's like somewhat consistent view. I just don't share some of the judgments behind the view. There is also some sort of like view like we will like hit some AI winter soon. I think I have like hard time like representing that in non-Strawman way. Also there is the view, so there is the view like it's really important for like there is a view which is like somewhat consistent, and the claim is something like we will like mostly solve technical alignment, but it's like really important for the American values to win. So like United States should like really race forward, because like otherwise we will all become like conquered by China, and this is like existentially is like similarly bad to using control and so on. And if you are like of this opinion that like your American values are the only thing to protect, and like we will like secure them for like a century if you win, then you should probably like kind of be working on like making the American companies like race harder and building energy infrastructure and stuff like that. I think we are also not representing the view too much.
There's a more niche version of the last one, which is improving anthropic capabilities so that OpenAI don't win, which I haven't actually seen someone do.
I'm wondering if this is like kind of like recursively on the collective agency scale, if there are some people who are like, it's really important to advance this team like inside Anthropic.
Some issues in research agendas and researchers in general. Something that I've been thinking quite a bit about lately is that it's actually really hard to find examples and domains where interpretability is like clearly needed, or the winner as a opposed to a nice to have. So what do I mean by a winner or needed versus a nice to have? So here's an example. In most legal domains, be it financial, recruiting, and so forth and so on, you can use an algorithm to determine who should be hired, or an algorithm to determine who should be given a loan to. In both of these scenarios, you have internal audit teams that will come and ask you like, hey, you use this model, how do we make sure that this model is fair and transparent for whatever measure of fairness and transparency that you're legally obliged to adhere to. And then you create a report, and the report goes there. If you get in trouble, it's a court of law that decides whether or not you were fair or transparent. So organizations have zero incentive to actually find meaningful ways to determine whether or not their models are biased or unfair. The only example where interpretability is a clear winner is the medical domain, where if you want to design a new drug, you really need to understand how, perhaps AlphaFold works, because you solve a problem that people have been trying to solve for a very long time. So by understanding how the system works, you can perhaps get past clinical trials and you have a new drug in the market, therefore your revenues go up. The question that I often ask myself, and I'd love to hear if people have any ideas, what are some of the actionable things we can do such that, or what are some of the domains we should be exploring, thinking about where interpretability is needed, but it does also outperform simple things like fine-tuning the content, right? Because it seems that we can't get past these basic measures of languages.
I think interpretability would be really useful if we understand more how the representations or abstraction change under optimization pressure. So if the model learns representation of some values, which I can point to using words or human understandable concept in training, and then people apply a lot of RL on top, it probably puts the representations under pressure to drift somehow or develop, or different representations can become the load bearing part of it. So if interpretability can tell me useful things about it, and very pro understanding the dynamics of abstractions inside of models.
So one belief I have is that interpretability and more principal approaches are useful when we are dealing with things that are not very intuitive. For example, all this discussion about emergent properties is a bit of a mess because there's no way of grounding it. Oh, this curve looks discontinuous. Oh, it actually doesn't look discontinuous if I look at the plot or whatever. That type of discussion would be much better if we would have a principal approach to questions like that. And another domain that feels to me sort of similar is the multi-agent case, because when people discuss usually multi-agent risk, it's oh, they could collude or they could, it's all agent-to-agent interactions that we are concerned. But I feel there is a whole range of risks related to hierarchically, an emergent macro agent that comes to be from the thing that is of a different type. And because it's a bit counterintuitive, we don't think to think like that. It's very hard to go about that in an intuitive way. And I feel theory is a useful thing to handhold you in things that are not intuitive.
All right, finally.
I think my argument wasn't that it's not useful or it's not interesting for us to explore, but rather, would people pay for it? There was a workshop a few months ago, and head of Gemini safety was present in the room, and the only interpretability method they use is probes, which we didn't need interpretability to. We had probes before we had McIntyre, right? So the question here is, and I would like to find domains where we need this. How do we convince ourselves? How do we come up with examples where the incentives are aligned such that by having this nice understanding, it leads to a place where people would want to use the systems.
Alright, we are nearly out of time, so if you have any parting words, you get 2 sentences each.
I think I was thinking about the first question as I arrived here. I think none of these agendas are zero-sum game. If you work on something and decide that you don't like it or it's not as meaningful as you thought it was, you can always choose to go somewhere else. And those skills would be really useful anyways. I mean, learning in general is useful no matter what you do. So, yeah, I think more people should be working in all agendas.
For the record, that was 3, but I don't know you so well, so I felt bad about interrupting, but other people.
I'd like to remind people of the law of equal and opposite advice. At least for me, like when I'm speaking here, I'm like having some implied audience or intended audience, I should say, or like reacting to like to what I think is the consensus or like the common opinion. So like you might be outside of who I'm trying to speak to, and then like my advice would be bad for you. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, also to advocate for pluralism of agendas. Like I don't think a single agenda will solve anything, and being able to combine multiple ones in a good way, I think is useful.
I mean, you can go very meta on the problem. Like you probably want some people who are really specialized in one agenda, you want some people who understand 2 agendas, 3 agendas. You want some people who kind of understand like all agendas, even if on somewhat like shallow level, and are able to see the connections, so you can choose which type of person you want to be with, or like kind of like what seems what could be your comparative advantage. I mean, I don't mean it completely as a joke. I think like for some people, like your super skill could be like ability to like translate between two different types of discourse, and it's maybe less shiny than being like I invented new agenda or something, but could be like fairly useful.